They opened their door because their youngest son said he only needed a few months. At first he called it help new locks, new passwords, new rules around the house. Then he asked his own parents to pay a care fee just to live in peace. His mother wrote every dollar in a small blue notebook, not knowing it would matter later. And when one bank letter arrived, their quiet fear finally had a name. This is a story about love, boundaries, and the courage to protect your own home. Tell us where you're watching from, and if this story touches you, please like and subscribe to help us reach 1,000 subscribers and keep writing more heartfelt stories. The morning light always reached our kitchen before it reached the rest of the house. It came through the narrow window above the sink, touched the white curtains Lorraine had sewn herself 20 years earlier, then settled across the old oak table where we had eaten almost every breakfast of our marriage. By the time the coffee finished dripping, the room would be warm enough for her to sit there in her robe, both hands wrapped around her mug, watching the yard as if the day had written her a private letter. Our house in Cedar Hollow, Ohio, was nothing anyone would stop to photograph. It was a single-story place with pale siding, a small front porch, and a narrow strip of flower bed that ran along the walkway. The roof had been patched twice. The back step creaked in wet weather. The garage door needed a firm hand and a little patience before it rolled all the way up, but it was ours. That word meant more to me at 72 than it ever had when I was young. Ours did not mean fancy. It meant paid for. It meant every board and nail had been earned without cheating anybody. It meant Lorraine and I could wake up slow, speak softly, leave the radio on low during breakfast, and not have to ask anyone's permission to live the way we had learned to live. I had spent most of my working years as a route supervisor for the county utility company. My job had been less glamorous than it sounded. I tracked crews, checked meters, read outage reports, and made sure the right men ended up on the right roads before a storm turned a small problem into a county-wide mess. I learned early that little numbers mattered. A wrong address, a missing digit, a maintenance date written in the wrong square. Small mistakes had a way of becoming expensive if nobody respected them. Lorraine understood that better than most. She had worked part-time as a bookkeeper for Wilkes Building Supply back when the store still smelled of sawdust and coffee, and men came in with measurements scribbled on the backs of envelopes. She could add a column of figures in her head while stirring gravy with one hand. Even after she retired, she still kept our grocery receipts folded into neat stacks and wrote household expenses in a little blue cloth-covered notebook she kept in the drawer beneath the dish towels. Some people might have called it old-fashioned. To us, it was peace. That fall, peace had a particular sound. The tick of the kitchen clock, the furnace clicking on before dawn, the whisper of Lorraine's slippers across the linoleum. Outside, her chrysanthemums were still holding their color, stubborn little blooms of yellow and rust that refused to give in to the cold mornings. I was tightening a loose screw on the porch railing the afternoon Darren called. Lorraine answered the phone in the kitchen. I heard her voice change before I heard his name. It softened in that way. A mother's voice softens, even when the child on the other end is a grown man with lines on his face and trouble in his pockets. "Darren," she said, "Honey, slow down." I stood on the porch with the screwdriver in my hand and looked out across the yard. A brown leaf dragged itself along the walkway, scraping softly over the concrete. I do not know why I remember that leaf, but I do. Sometimes the mind keeps the smallest things because the heart already knows something larger is coming. When I came inside, Lorraine was standing near the sink, one hand pressed to her chest. Darren had lost his job. He had been working at a car dealership outside Dayton, selling trucks mostly, though I never fully understood what his position was anymore. Over the years, Darren had a way of describing jobs in words that sounded bigger than the work itself. Sales consultant, finance coordinator, client experience manager. The titles changed. The worry in his voice did not. "He says it was sudden," Lorraine told me after she hung up. "The dealership cut people. He said he just needs a few months." "A few months," I repeated. She looked at me with those tired blue eyes of hers, the ones that could still turn young when she spoke about our children. "Milton." He sounded awful. Darren was 43 years old. But to Lorraine, He would always be the boy who used to run barefoot through the yard, with grass stains on his knees. The youngest. The one who cried hardest when a pet died. The one who called her mama long after he was too old to say it in front of friends. I wanted to be careful. Not cold, just careful. Did he say what happened exactly? He said they let him go. He said he's embarrassed. Her voice lowered. He asked if he could stay here while he gets back on his feet. I looked toward the hallway, toward the back room that had once been Lorraine's sewing room. A small room with a narrow window, a closet full of old fabric, and a lamp with a cracked shade. It had been quiet for years. Lorraine followed my gaze. He said only a few months, she added. A man can hear a question even when his wife does not ask it directly. I thought about our fixed income, our routines, the delicate balance of two old people who had arranged their days around each other's limitations. I thought about Darren's history of starting over, each fresh start somehow requiring someone else to clear the ground first. But I also thought about the shame in a grown son's voice when he has to call home and admit he cannot stand on his own. No father likes hearing his boy has nowhere to go, I said. Lorraine's shoulders dropped with relief. Darren arrived 2 days later in a dark gray sedan with a dent above the rear wheel and one large suitcase in the trunk. He looked thinner than I remembered, though not sick. His hair was still thick, combed back with too much product, and he wore a black zip jacket that tried to make him look sharper than he felt. There was a quickness in him, a restless energy around the eyes, as if he had already rehearsed every possible judgment we might make and prepared a defense for each one. Lorraine opened the door before he knocked. "Oh, Darren," she said. He hugged her hard. A little too hard, maybe. Or maybe I only think that now, because I know what came later. At the time, I saw a son pressing his face into his mother's shoulder, and I told myself not to be suspicious of pain. "Thanks, Mom," he said. "I mean it. I just need a little time." Then he turned to me. "Dad." I held out my hand, but he stepped in and hugged me too. His jacket smelled faintly of cologne and cold air. "I'm sorry," he said near my ear. "I know this is not ideal." "Most things worth doing are not ideal," I told him. "Bring your bag in." Lorraine had prepared the old sewing room as if he were coming home from college instead of unemployment. Fresh sheets, a folded quilt, towels stacked on the chair. She had even cleared one shelf in the closet and moved her sewing basket into our bedroom. Darren stood in the doorway and looked around. "This is perfect," he said. "Really? I won't be in your way." Lorraine smiled like he had given her something. For the first week, he tried very hard to be useful. He fixed the dripping faucet in the bathroom after watching a video on his phone. He carried groceries from the car without being asked. He set up the television so Lorraine could find her cooking shows faster. He even drove to the hardware store and came back with weather stripping for the back door, saying we were losing heat around the frame. Neighbors noticed. June Callister from across the street waved one afternoon while Darren was trimming a low branch from the maple tree. "Good to see a son helping out," she called. Darren smiled and lifted a hand. "Figured it was time I came home and looked after them a little." Lorraine heard that from the porch. I saw her face change. Pride, relief, maybe even gratitude. After years of worrying that our children had grown too busy for us, here was the youngest standing in the yard, telling the world he had come back to care for his parents. I wanted to believe it too. There are lies that arrive wearing ugly clothes, and you know them at the door. But the dangerous ones come dressed as answered prayers. A few evenings later, I passed the hallway and saw Darren sitting at the small desk in his room, laptop open, phone pressed between his shoulder and ear. His voice was low and smooth. "No, I can get the documents," he said. "I'm staying here now." He saw me in the doorway and closed the laptop halfway. "Job stuff," he said quickly. "Applications, references. You know how everything is online now." "I know enough," I said. He gave me a smile that did not quite rest on his face. After that, the changes came in small, reasonable packages. The first was the Wi-Fi router. "This thing is ancient," Darren announced one morning, holding up the little black box as if it were a dead animal he had found under the sink. Dad, this is a security risk. People can hack old networks in 5 minutes. Lorraine looked worried. Can they really? They can, he said. But don't worry, I'll handle it. By noon, he had bought a new router and installed it himself. When Lorraine asked for the password so she could write it down, Darren laughed gently. No, Mom, that's the whole problem. You can't keep passwords in a notebook anymore. I'll put it into your phone for you. He said it kindly enough, and Lorraine let him take her phone. I watched from the kitchen table as his thumbs moved over the screen. Then came the doorbell camera. Just for safety, he said. There are scams targeting seniors all over the place. Somebody comes to the door pretending to be from the power company, and next thing you know, they're inside. I had worn a utility badge for 32 years. I knew the difference between a real crew and a fraud. But I also knew Lorraine felt safer when she could see who was on the porch, so I did not object. Then he asked for the spare keys. Not to control anything, he said, holding both hands up like a man surrendering before anyone accused him. Just practical. What if one of you locks yourself out? What if Dad falls in the yard and I need to get in fast? Lorraine looked at me. I took the spare ring from the hook near the pantry and handed it to him. Keep them where you can find them, I said. I will, he replied. He slipped them into his jacket pocket. It was such a small sound, those keys settling in the fabric. Soft metal against cloth. Nothing dramatic, no thunder, no warning bell. Just the sound of something leaving its usual place. A week later, Darren asked about paperwork. Insurance, taxes, house documents, he said over breakfast. You should really have digital copies. What if there's a fire? What if something happens and nobody can find anything? Lorraine touched the edge of her blue notebook. Your father keeps everything in the file cabinet. I know, Mom. But paper is not enough anymore. I looked at him over my coffee. What exactly do you need? Nothing major. I can scan things, organize them, make sure you're protected. Protected. That word would come back to me many times later. I let him take the folder of insurance policies, property tax records, and old repair receipts into the back room. Not the deed. Not the social security cards. Not the bank papers. I still had enough old habits in me to keep certain things separate, but I gave him more than I should have, because suspicion felt like a cruel thing to offer a son who claimed he was trying to help. That is how it begins sometimes. Not with a shout, not with a threat, with a favor, with a son carrying groceries, with a new router, with a mother smiling because the neighbors saw her child being kind. By the end of the second week, Darren's suitcase was no longer in the corner of the sewing room. His shoes were by the back door. His jacket hung on the hook where Lorraine used to keep her gardening sweater. A stack of his unopened mail sat on the kitchen counter. His coffee mug, black with silver lettering from some dealership sales award, appeared beside our two plain white cups in the cabinet. He was not visiting anymore. He was settling. One Saturday afternoon, he pulled 2 plastic storage bins from his car and dragged them across the front walk. He was in a hurry, talking on his phone, not looking where he stepped. One bin slipped from his hand and landed hard in Lorraine's chrysanthemum bed, crushing several yellow blooms into the damp soil. Lorraine was in the doorway. I saw her flinch. Darren glanced down. Sorry, Mom. I'll fix it later. But he did not stop. He kept walking, phone still at his ear. After he disappeared inside, Lorraine went down the porch steps slowly. She knelt beside the flower bed, her knees stiff, her fingers gentle as she lifted the broken stems. The flowers were not dead. Not all of them. Just bent in that sad way living things bend when something careless passes over them. I stood behind the screen door and watched her. She did not cry. She did not call Darren back. She simply tried to set the stems upright, pressing soil around their bases as though patience alone could undo the damage. He's just going through a hard time, she said, though I was not sure whether she was speaking to me, to herself, or to the flowers. I wanted to answer. I wanted to say that hard times do not give a man the right to stop seeing what belongs to other people. I wanted to say that a grown son can be wounded and still be careless. I wanted to say I did not like the way our house had begun to feel different with him inside it. But Lorraine's hands were trembling around those broken stems, and I knew she needed hope more than warning in that moment. So I stayed quiet. Behind me, inside the house, Darren's voice moved down the hallway, confident and low, already filling rooms that had once belonged only to the two of us. I looked at the spare key hook near the pantry. Empty. Then I looked back at Lorraine in the flower bed, trying to save what had been bent before it became broken. And for the first time since our son came home, I felt a thin, cold line of unease run through the place I had always called safe. For a while, I tried to tell myself that every house changes when another person moves in. A chair gets pushed closer to the wall. A towel ends up on the wrong hook. The refrigerator fills with food you did not buy and would not have chosen. Someone leaves a light on in a room you thought was empty. Those things are ordinary. Marriage teaches a person to make room for another life, and parenthood teaches it twice over. So when Darren's presence began pressing into the corners of our days, I told myself it was only adjustment. Lorraine told herself the same thing, though she did it with more hope than conviction. He's finding his footing, she said one morning while folding dish towels at the kitchen table. A man loses his job. It shakes him. I was standing at the counter scraping toast crumbs into the sink. Losing your job doesn't change where the coffee cups belong. She glanced toward the cabinet, where Darren had moved the mugs according to size and color sometime after midnight. Our two plain white cups had been pushed to the back. His black dealership mug sat in front, handle turned outward like a display piece. Lorraine gave me a tired little smile. It's just a cup, Milton. She was right, of course. And she was wrong. The first real sign came on a Monday morning with a sheet of printer paper taped to our refrigerator. I found it while reaching for the milk. The paper was crisp, aligned perfectly, and titled in bold letters, Household Routine. Under that were neat categories Darren must have typed the night before. Laundry, Tuesdays and Fridays only. Thermostat, do not raise above 70 without checking first. Television volume. Keep under 18 after 8 p.m. Medication. Confirm morning and evening doses. Doors. Back door locked by 7 p.m. I stood there with the milk carton in my hand and read the list twice. Lorraine came in behind me, tying the belt of her robe. Her hair was still pinned loosely from sleep, silver strands slipping free around her temples. "What's that?" she asked. Before I could answer, Darren walked in wearing sweatpants and one of those athletic shirts that made a man look as if he were on his way to exercise, though I had not seen him exercise once since arriving. "Just something to keep us organized," he said, opening the cabinet for coffee. "Nothing serious." I tapped the paper with one finger. "We've managed our laundry for 50 years. He gave a small laugh. "Not rude exactly. Worse than rude. Patient. I know, Dad. But systems help. You always said that when I was growing up." I said systems help people do their jobs. I didn't say a grown man tapes rules to his parents' refrigerator. His face tightened for half a second, then smoothed out. "Not rules," he said. "Reminders." Lorraine stepped closer and read the list. I watched her eyes pause on the medication line. She did not like it. I could tell by the way her mouth pressed into a thin line. But then Darren touched her shoulder. "Mom, remember last month when you couldn't remember whether Dad had taken his blood pressure pill? That was one morning," she said softly. "And it scared you, didn't it?" She looked down. It had scared her. I remembered that morning well. I had taken the pill. She had simply forgotten seeing me do it. We had laughed about it by lunch, but Darren had taken that small, harmless confusion and placed it under glass, turning it into evidence. "That's all I'm trying to prevent," he said. "You two shouldn't have to carry everything alone anymore." There it was again. Care. Spoken in a tone that made refusal sound like foolish pride. So the paper stayed on the refrigerator. After that, Darren's help became harder to separate from control. He started checking the thermostat every evening, frowning as if each degree were a personal betrayal. He moved the laundry detergent to the high shelf because Lorraine used too much. He placed a pill organizer beside the salt and pepper shakers, though I preferred keeping my medicine in the bathroom cabinet where it had always been. He began asking whether we had locked the doors even when I had locked them myself. At first, these were annoyances, little rubs against the grain of the day. Then he took my chair. It was a brown recliner by the front window, worn soft at the arms and shaped over the years to the bend of my back. From that chair I could see the street, Lorraine's flowers, June Callister's mailbox, and the maple tree that dropped more leaves than any tree had a right to. I had read newspapers there, paid bills there, slept through ball games there, and held ice packs to my knee there after the surgery. One afternoon I came in from the garage and found it gone. Not gone from the house, just moved. Darren had dragged it to the corner near the hallway, replacing it with a narrow, modern chair he had bought secondhand. The new chair looked nice enough, but nobody with knees over 60 would call it comfortable. "What happened here?" I asked. Darren looked up from his phone. I opened up the room. That recliner was blocking flow. Flow. Yeah. Movement. Safety. You don't want Mom tripping around furniture. Lorraine, who was standing near the sink, did not turn around. "She never tripped on my chair," I said. Darren pocketed his phone and walked over with that careful tone he had begun using when he wanted me to feel old. "Dad, you don't always notice hazards when you've lived with them too long. That's normal. I'm not criticizing you." "No, I'm helping." The word landed between us with a dull weight. Helping. He used it the way some men use a locked gate. That evening, after Darren went into his room, I dragged the recliner back myself. It took longer than it used to. My breath came hard by the time I had the chair near the window again. Lorraine stood in the doorway watching, one hand at her throat. "You shouldn't strain yourself," she said. "I'm not dead yet." "I didn't say you were." "No. But he keeps arranging the house like I am." She looked toward the hallway. "He's scared, Milton." "Of what?" "Of failing. Of having nothing." I wanted to say that fear did not give him permission to shrink us inside our own walls. But Lorraine's face was soft with worry, and I knew she was already defending him against thoughts she had not admitted having. So I sat down in my chair, because at least that small piece of the house had been put back where it belonged. For a few days, Darren said nothing about it. Then came the paper at the kitchen table. It was not taped to the refrigerator this time. It was placed neatly beside my coffee mug, held down by the salt shaker so we could not miss it. The title was longer than the first one, Monthly Care and Home Management Contribution. I remember the exact shade of that paper. Not white. Pale blue. Like something meant to look official, without being official. Darren waited until Lorraine and I had both sat down. "I've been thinking," he began. That phrase has started more bad decisions than almost any other sentence in the English language. He folded his hands on the table. "I don't want resentment building up. Not from me, not from you. So I figured it's better to be clear." Lorraine looked at the paper but did not touch it. "Clear about what?" "Expenses. Time. Household support." He pointed to the first line as if giving a business presentation. "I'm here helping with things neither of you should have to handle alone anymore. Internet, security, organizing bills, maintenance planning, medication oversight. That takes time." I stared at him. "You're living here for free." His eyes flicked to mine. "I'm not living here for free if I'm providing care." Lorraine inhaled softly. Darren turned toward her, lowering his voice. "Mom, I'm not trying to be difficult, but if I were working full-time, I'd be bringing in real money. Instead, I'm here making sure you two are safe." "We didn't ask you to stop looking for work," I said. "I am looking for work, Dad." His jaw tightened. "But interviews take time. Applications take time. And frankly, so does keeping this house from falling behind." Lorraine picked up the paper then. Her fingers moved slowly down the page. The amount was printed near the bottom, $650 monthly. "Darren," she whispered. "It's not rent," he said quickly. "Don't think of it that way. That would be ugly. This is just a care coordination fee, a home management contribution. Families do this all the time. End of loony. Lease-bearing nan, mine nine, end of 40. Of Loonian.com. "They do?" she asked. "Responsible ones do." There it was, the hook beneath the bait. Responsible. He knew where to press. Lorraine had spent her whole life trying to be a responsible mother, a responsible wife, a responsible neighbor, a responsible Christian woman who did not burden anyone and did not let private troubles spill into public view. Darren did not have to raise his voice. He only had to make refusal feel like selfishness. I pushed the paper back toward him. No. His expression changed, but only for a moment. A shadow moved across his face and disappeared. Dad, I expected you to struggle with this. Did you? You've always had a hard time accepting help. I accept help when it is help. Lorraine looked between us. Maybe we should talk about it later. Darren leaned back, wounded now. He was good at wounded. His eyes softened, his shoulders dropped, his voice lost its edge. Mom, if I leave, who's going to keep this place running for you two? The room went quiet. Outside, a truck passed slowly down the street, tires hissing over damp pavement. Somewhere in the wall, the furnace gave a low click. Lorraine looked toward the refrigerator, toward the routine tape there, toward the pill organizer on the counter, toward the new router blinking in the corner like a little green eye. I could see the thought forming in her. Not because she believed Darren was right, because she was afraid he might leave angry, and a mother's heart often mistakes peacekeeping for love. She stood and went to the small drawer beside the stove, the one where she kept grocery cash in white envelopes marked with her careful handwriting. She removed one envelope, counted bills with fingers that had balanced store ledgers for 20 years, and placed the money on the table. Darren did not grab it. That would have made it too plain. He waited. Then he covered her hand with his. Thank you, Mom, he said. You're doing the right thing. I looked at Lorraine's face and saw no relief there, only a kind of quiet confusion. That night, after the house had settled and Darren's door had closed, I woke to a thin line of light under the kitchen door. I found Lorraine at the table in her robe, the blue cloth notebook open in front of her. She did not hear me at first. Her pen moved slowly, carefully, the way it always did when she was trying to make numbers behave. I stopped in the doorway. She had written the date, then the amount, 650元. Beside it, in smaller letters, she wrote, Darren said, it is not rent. Care coordination fee. Said if he leaves, no one will keep house running. She paused after that sentence. Her pen hovered above the paper. Then she added, I gave cash from grocery envelope. I felt something in my chest fold inward. Lorraine, I said softly. She startled and closed the notebook halfway, as if I had caught her doing something shameful. I just don't want to forget, she said. You don't have to hide it from me. Her eyes filled, but she did not cry. I don't know what I'm doing, Milton. I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. The kitchen looked different at night. Smaller, more honest. The refrigerator hummed. The paper routine hung there under a magnet from Niagara Falls, where we had gone on our 25th anniversary. Darren's schedule looked almost absurd beside that old souvenir, and yet it had changed the air in the room. Lorraine opened the notebook again. I keep thinking maybe he's right, she said. Maybe we do need more help than we admit. We need help with heavy things, I said. Storm windows, gutters, lifting mulch. That's not the same as needing permission. She wiped at one eye with the heel of her hand. He's our son. I know. I don't want to turn against him. Writing down what happened is not turning against him. She looked at the page. Then why does it feel like betrayal? I did not answer quickly. Because the truth was cruel. It feels that way because he is making you choose between loving him and protecting yourself. The words sat there with us. After that, the notebook became quieter than a secret. Lorraine did not announce it. She did not accuse. She simply wrote, the $90 Darren requested for router protection, the $120 he said covered extra utility usage, the $300 he called a garage repair reserve, though no repairman came and no supplies appeared. When he asked for money through Zelle, she wrote the date and the memo line. When she withdrew cash from the ATM, she tucked the receipt into the notebook, like a pressed flower from a sad occasion. Darren kept finding new names for the same taking. Never rent, never repayment, never money he owed, always support, contribution, protection, reserve, words polished smooth enough that a mother could hold them without noticing the edge. One afternoon I came into the bedroom, and found Lorraine kneeling beside the lower drawer of her sewing cabinet. The blue notebook was in her hand. She slipped it under a tin full of buttons, then pushed the drawer shut. She looked up and saw me watching. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I held out my hand. She hesitated before giving it to me. I opened to the first page, then the second, then the third. Her handwriting was careful at the beginning. By the later entries, some letters leaned harder into the paper. Not messy, just pressed down with feeling. I read each line. I read my wife's fear in numbers. I read my son's voice in phrases he had taught her to repeat. I read the slow rearranging of our life into charges and conditions. When I closed the notebook, the room was very still. Lorraine stood with both hands clasped in front of her, waiting for me to be angry. Not at Darren, maybe. At her. At the money. At the fact that she had given it. I placed the notebook back in her hands. From now on, I said, write down the exact words. She blinked. What? Not just the amount, not just what he calls it. Write what he says before you give it to him. Write the date, the time, whether it was cash or transfer. If there's a receipt, keep it. Her mouth trembled. You think it matters? I don't know yet, I said. But small things matter when someone tries to make you doubt your own memory. Lorraine looked down at the blue notebook as if it had changed weight. Then she nodded once. A small nod, not strong yet, but not helpless either. That evening, Darren came out of his room and asked why dinner was late. Lorraine was standing at the stove, stirring a pot of chicken soup. The old Lorraine would have apologized. She would have explained that the carrots took longer, or that she had lost track of time, or that she was sorry. This time, she did not turn around. It will be ready when it's ready, she said. Darren gave a short laugh, waiting for her to soften it. She did not. I was sitting in my recliner by the window, back where it belonged, watching the light fade behind the maple tree. I did not smile. I did not speak. But I saw Darren glance from his mother to me, measuring the room as if noticing, for the first time, that not every quiet thing was weak. The paper routine still hung on the refrigerator. His mug still sat in the cabinet. His shoes still crowded the back door. But under a tin of old buttons in Lorraine's sewing cabinet, there was a blue notebook filling slowly with dates, amounts, and exact words. And for the first time since Darren came home, a record existed that belonged to us, not to him. The next Tuesday began with frost on the grass. Not snow. Not yet. Just a thin silver skin over the yard, delicate enough to disappear under the first honest touch of morning sun. Lorraine noticed it before I did. She stood at the kitchen window with her coffee in both hands, looking out at the flower bed where the chrysanthemums had lost most of their color. First hard frost will finish them, she said. I was at the table with the newspaper folded beside my plate, though I had not read more than 2 lines. Darren's paper routine still hung on the refrigerator, but by then my eyes had learned to move around it the way a man steps around a crack in the sidewalk he has decided not to repair yet. Darren came out of the back room at 7:30, freshly shaved, wearing a pressed blue shirt and the same dark slacks he wore whenever he wanted us to believe something official was happening. His hair was combed back too neatly for a man who had just woken up. He poured coffee into his black dealership mug and stood by the counter scrolling on his phone. I've got an interview in Columbus, he said. Lorraine turned from the window. This morning? 10:30. I need to get on the road. That's good news, she said too quickly. As if quick happiness could make it true. Darren gave her a distracted smile. Could be. They're looking for someone with finance experience. The word finance sat strangely in the room. I looked up from my plate. What company? He took a sip of coffee before answering. It's a smaller group. You wouldn't know them. Try me. His eyes moved to mine, then back to his phone. Dad, I don't need you checking up on every place I apply. I asked the name. It's preliminary, he said, already turning toward the hallway. No point discussing it until there's something real. Lorraine watched him go, still holding her mug. She had learned not to push when Darren sounded brittle. I had learned that when a man avoided a simple question, the simple question was usually the point. 10 minutes later, he left through the back door. He did not ask if we needed anything from Columbus. He did not kiss his mother's cheek. He only called out, "I'll be back late," and the door closed behind him. His car backed out of the driveway too fast. The house became quiet after he left, but not peaceful. There is a difference. Quiet is only the absence of noise. Peace is the absence of waiting for the next thing to go wrong. Lorraine washed the breakfast dishes. I took the trash bag from under the sink, tied it off, and carried it through the side door toward the bins near the garage. The cold air hit my face clean and sharp. Across the street, June Callister was pulling her empty garbage can back from the curb, wrapped in a long gray cardigan, her white hair tucked under a knit cap. "Morning, Milton," she called. "Morning, June. Your boy off early today?" "Interview," I said. She nodded in that neighborly way people do when they are not asking questions but are listening for the answer anyway. "Hope it turns out." "So do I." I put the trash in the bin and walked to the mailbox at the edge of the drive. Most days, the mail was nothing but grocery ads, insurance notices, charity envelopes, and the occasional postcard from a dentist reminding us time still had teeth. That morning, one envelope stood apart. It was thick, white, official, Buckeye Valley Community Bank. I stood by the mailbox with the envelope in my hand longer than I needed to. Lorraine and I had banked with Buckeye Valley for more than 30 years. I knew the feel of their ordinary statements, the pale blue return address, the thin paper. This was different, heavier. The kind of envelope that carried forms, not information. On the front, beneath our names, a line of print read, "Home Improvement Line, Draw Notice." For a moment, I thought it had been delivered to the wrong house. Then I saw our address. I took it inside. Lorraine was wiping the counter when I entered. She looked at my face before she looked at the envelope. "What is it?" "Bank letter." She dried her hands on a towel. "Statement?" "No." I sat at the kitchen table and slid my thumb under the sealed flap. The paper opened with a soft tear that sounded far too loud. Inside were 3 pages, folded precisely. I read the first page once, then again, then a third time, slower. Lorraine remained standing. "Milton?" I laid the page flat on the table and turned it toward her. At the top, in clean black print, were our names. Milton R. Greer, Lorraine M. Greer. Below that was a reference number, an approval line, and a phrase that made my chest tighten in a way I had not felt since the day a transformer blew near Route 16 and took out power to half the county. Home Improvement Line of Credit. Approved limit, $68,000. Initial draw disbursed, $7,200. Pending draw request, $24,000. Purpose, roof replacement and window upgrade. Lorraine lowered herself into the chair across from me. "We didn't do this," she said. "No. The roof doesn't need replacing." "No. The windows are old," I said. "Not broken." She touched the paper with 2 fingers, as if it might stain her. Could it be a mistake? That was a merciful question. Mistake is easier to hold than betrayal. I reached for my reading glasses from the table and studied the second page. The old work habits came back without invitation. I did not read the letter like a frightened homeowner. I read it like a route supervisor reading a report after a storm, looking for the number that did not belong. The application date was 3 weeks earlier. 3 weeks earlier, Darren had taken a stack of insurance and repair papers into the back room to scan them. The contact email looked almost like mine. Almost. My real email used my name and birth year. This one had a dot inserted after the first initial and an extra number at the end. A small thing, unless you had spent your life knowing that small things are where trouble hides. The secondary phone number ended in 4 digits I recognized. Darren's. I felt Lorraine watching me. "What?" she whispered. I did not answer yet. The contractor estimate was attached in summary form. The company name was printed as Fairlane Residential Improvements, LLC. I had lived in Cedar Hollow long enough to know most roofers within 40 miles by the trucks they drove and the coffee shops they favored. I had never heard of Fairlane. The address listed beneath it was not a workshop, not an office, not even a storefront. It looked like a box number in Asheville. I turned to the third page. Electronic signature acknowledged. My name. Lorraine's name. A timestamp from 11:48 p.m. I pushed back from the table. Lorraine's face had gone pale. I never signed anything, she said. I know. Milton. I never even saw this. I know. She looked toward the hallway, toward the closed door of Darren's room, though he was not behind it. The house seemed to shrink around us. That was the moment the blue notebook changed meaning. Until then, it had been a record of pressure. Painful. Yes. Wrong. Yes. But still something a mother could explain to herself as money given under confusion, under guilt, under the heavy fog of family. This was different. This had our names printed in black ink. This had a bank reference number. This had a loan amount large enough to reach into the walls of our house and leave a debt where peace used to be. Lorraine stood suddenly and walked to the counter. She placed both hands flat on it, her shoulders rising and falling. He wouldn't do this, she said. I did not ask who she meant. He wouldn't use our names. I removed my glasses and set them on the table. Someone did. She turned to me, and the look in her eyes was not denial exactly. It was a mother, standing at the edge of a truth so ugly, she could not yet step onto it. Maybe he thought he was helping, she said. Maybe there was some repair plan. And he didn't explain. Lorraine, I'm just saying, the pending draw is $24,000. Her mouth closed. The first draw already went out. She gripped the counter harder. I regretted the bluntness as soon as I saw her face. But there are truths that become more cruel the longer you soften them. I gathered the pages and aligned their edges. Where's the blue notebook? She blinked. In the sewing cabinet. Get it? She hesitated. Not because she disagreed. Because the act of bringing that notebook to the table beside a bank letter felt like crossing a line that could not be uncrossed. When she returned with it, she held it against her chest. I cleared a space on the table. She placed the notebook down slowly. I opened to the first page. $650 care coordination fee, then $90 router protection, $120 extra utilities, $300 garage repair reserve. Garage repair reserve. I read that line twice. Did anyone ever come to look at the garage? I asked. No. Did he buy anything for the garage? No. Did he say what the repair was? Lorraine sat down again. He said there were structural concerns, that if we didn't plan ahead, it could become expensive. I looked at the bank papers. Roof replacement, window upgrade, garage reserve, care coordination, home management. The words were different, but the shape beneath them had begun to match. Lorraine followed my eyes from the notebook to the letter. Oh, Milton, she said. That was all. Just my name. It carried sorrow, fear, apology, and a question she was afraid to ask. We did not call Darren. That was important. There was a time in my life when I would have confronted him immediately. I would have stood in the backroom doorway with the bank letter in my hand and demanded an answer before the sun went down. But age does not only take strength from a man, sometimes it gives him restraint in exchange. I had watched enough emergency crews make bad situations worse by rushing into wires they had not confirmed were dead. This was the same. A live wire. We needed to know what we were touching before we grabbed it. The rest of the day moved strangely. Lorraine made lunch but did not eat much. I checked the windows, the roofline, the garage, as if physical evidence might explain a financial crime. The shingles were weathered but sound. The windows rattled in a hard wind. But they had some secure. The garage smelled of motor oil and cardboard. No contractor had measured anything. No estimate had been pinned to a stud. No ladder marks showed in the dirt. Around 3, Darren came home. He did not look like a man returning from an interview. He looked like a man returning from an argument he had not won. His jaw was tight. His shirt collar was open. He carried no folder, no business card, no hopeful expression for Lorraine to cling to. How'd it go? She asked from the kitchen. He tossed his keys on the counter. Fine. Did they say when they'd call? Mom, not now. She flinched, and I saw him see it. He softened immediately. Sorry, he said. Long drive. He took his phone and went out the back door. Through the kitchen window, I watched him stand near the fence with one hand on his hip, phone pressed to his ear. The glass kept most of his voice outside, but every few seconds a phrase slipped through when he turned. Draw schedule. Pause. No, the verification hold is temporary. Pause. I uploaded the contractor invoice. Lorraine stood beside me without realizing she had moved. Darren lowered his voice, but the last sentence came through clear enough. They won't notice if it clears by Friday. Lorraine reached for the edge of the sink. I did not move. Darren ended the call and stood in the yard for a long moment, staring at nothing. Then he put the phone in his pocket, rubbed both hands over his face, and came back inside with the look of a man putting on a mask before entering a room. He smiled at Lorraine. "What's for dinner?" She could not answer. "Soup," I said. Darren looked at me, maybe hearing something flat in my voice. "Sounds good." He walked down the hallway and closed his door. Not slammed it. Closed it. A careful man closes doors quietly when he has something to hide. That night, after Darren's light went out, Lorraine and I sat at the kitchen table. We had done that more often since he came home. But this time the room felt different. We were not discussing discomfort anymore. We were looking at paper that said someone had reached beyond our patience and into our financial life. I placed the bank letter on the right side of the table. Lorraine placed the blue notebook on the left. Between them sat the sugar bowl, ordinary and ridiculous, as if our old life had not yet understood it was being crowded out. Lorraine's hands trembled in her lap. "He's our son, Milton." "I know. I keep saying that like it changes what's on the page." I looked at her. "It changes how much it hurts." Her eyes filled. For a while we said nothing. The furnace came on. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere down the hallway, Darren shifted in the back room that had once held Lorraine's sewing machine and folded fabric. I pulled a brown envelope from the drawer where we kept stamps and spare checkbooks. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Keeping things together." I slid the bank letter inside. Then copies of the ATM receipts Lorraine had tucked into the notebook. Then a photograph of the pale blue fee paper, which I had taken earlier while Darren was outside. I did not remove pages from her notebook. That book belonged whole, but I wrote a note listing the entries that connected to money Darren had requested. Lorraine watched me work. "Do you think we should call the bank?" "Yes." "Tonight?" "No, we go in person tomorrow morning." She nodded slowly. "Should we tell Darren?" "No." The word came out harder than I intended. She looked down the hallway. "He'll be angry if he finds out we went behind his back. He went behind ours first." That sentence settled over us with a terrible finality. I sealed the brown envelope, but did not lick it shut. I wanted to be able to add more if needed. Then I wrote on the front in block letters, "Bank ask in person." My handwriting looked like someone else's. Before we went to bed, I walked down the hallway and stopped outside Darren's door. A thin blue light shone underneath. Not the warm yellow of a bedside lamp. Phone light. Laptop light. The color of someone still working long after pretending to sleep. His fingers tapped softly on a keyboard. Fussed. Then stopped. Then started again. I stood there breathing through my nose, feeling the old worker in me rise up from some deep place. The man who knew bad reports did not improve by ignoring them. The man who knew every outage had a source. Every false reading had a cause. Every number that did not belong had entered the system somewhere. Lorraine appeared behind me in the hall. She did not speak. I turned away from Darren's door. In the kitchen, the brown envelope waited on the table beside her blue notebook. In the morning, we would take both to Buckeye Valley Community Bank. We would not call ahead. We would not ask Darren's permission. And for the first time since our son had come home, I understood that protecting him and protecting ourselves might no longer be the same thing. We left the house before Darren woke. That was the first time in weeks Lorraine and I had moved through our own kitchen like people trying not to disturb a stranger. The sky outside was still pale and undecided. Frost silvered the grass along the edge of the driveway, and the maple tree stood bare over the yard, its branches thin against the morning. Lorraine wore her navy coat with the missing button at the cuff. I carried the brown envelope under my arm, pressed flat against my ribs as if it were something fragile. The blue notebook was inside Lorraine's purse. She had asked twice if we should leave it at home. Both times I said no. Darren's bedroom door stayed closed as we passed the hallway. No blue light showed underneath now. No tapping keys. Just silence. Lorraine paused near the back door and looked toward his room. "He'll wonder where we went," she whispered. "Let him wonder." The words came out colder than I meant them to. I saw them land on her face, and I softened my voice. "We're not doing anything wrong." She nodded, but her hand tightened around the strap of her purse. That was the cruelty of what Darren had done. Before we ever reached the bank, before any employee read a single page, before any fraud department opened a case, he had already made his own parents feel sneaky for protecting themselves. I drove the 12 minutes into town with the radio off. Buckeye Valley Community Bank sat on Main Street between Harlan's Pharmacy and a family hair salon with a faded red and white awning. It was the same low brick building it had been for decades, though the sign had been replaced twice and the old night deposit box had been painted over. A row of small American flags lined the planter near the entrance. Inside, through the glass doors, I could see the soft glow of fluorescent lights and the shape of someone vacuuming near the teller counter. Lorraine looked at the building and took a breath. "We've been coming here since before Darren was born," she said. "I know. That makes it worse somehow." I understood. A bank is supposed to be a place where private things stay orderly. A place where numbers behave. A place where a lifetime of deposits, signatures, and discipline can sit quietly behind locked systems and official counters. Now we were walking in with proof that our own names had been used against us. The lobby smelled faintly of coffee, carpet cleaner, and printer toner. There was a small table near the wall with deposit slips, pens chained to little metal stands, and a bulletin board advertising a church pancake breakfast, a used snowblower, and a missing orange cat named Peaches. Ordinary things. I was grateful for them. Ordinary things hold a person steady when the ground starts shifting. A young woman behind the teller counter looked up as we entered. She was not tall, but she carried herself with the alertness of someone who noticed more than she said. Her brown hair was tied back at the nape of her neck, and she wore a cream cardigan over a bank blouse with a name tag that read, Tessa Whitcomb. There was a small silver cross at her throat, and a pencil tucked behind one ear. For a second, she looked at me the way bank employees look at any customer. Then recognition warmed her face. "Mr. Greer?" I stopped. "Yes, I thought that was you." She stepped away from the teller station and came around the counter. "I'm Tessa Whitcomb. My mother used to work here years ago." "Clara Whitcomb." "Clara," I said. "Of course. She always kept peppermints in the top drawer." Tessa smiled, and for one moment the room became a place from the past. "She still does. She retired, but the peppermints survived." Lorraine managed a small smile. Tessa's expression shifted gently when she noticed the envelope under my arm and the way Lorraine held her purse. Good bankers, like good utility men, know when something is not routine before anyone says so. "How can I help you both today?" she asked. I glanced toward the teller counter. "Somewhere private if you have it." She did not ask why in the lobby. Of course. She led us to a small office with a glass wall and a round table barely large enough for 3 chairs. There was a framed print of an Ohio-covered bridge on the wall, and a box of tissues placed in the center of the table. I wondered how many private disasters had been unfolded on that same round table. Tessa closed the door but left the blinds open. That detail mattered to me. It said she understood privacy without making us feel trapped. I placed the brown envelope on the table. "We received this yesterday," I said. My voice sounded steady. It did not feel steady. Tessa opened the envelope carefully and removed the bank letter first. Her eyes moved over the page, then back to the top, then down again. She did not gasp. She did not say, "Oh my God." She did not perform alarm for our benefit, but the air around her changed. She reached for the second page, then the third. "Did either of you apply for this home improvement line?" she asked. "No," I said. Lorraine shook her head. "Did either of you authorize a contractor to submit an estimate on your behalf?" "No." "Did you complete an electronic signature request?" "No." Tessa nodded once, not as if she doubted us, but as if each answer was fitting into a procedure she knew by heart. She looked at Lorraine. Mrs. Greer, has anyone been helping you manage online banking, email, or household paperwork recently? Lorraine's eyes dropped to her purse. Our son has been staying with us, she said. Tessa wrote nothing yet. Okay, he said he was helping, Lorraine added, and the ache in those words made Tessa pause. I understand. No judgment, no pity, just enough understanding to let Lorraine keep talking if she wanted to. I removed the photograph of the pale blue fee paper, the ATM receipts, and my handwritten note. Then Lorraine opened her purse and took out the blue notebook. She held it for a moment before setting it on the table. Tessa looked at it, not like it was strange, but like it might be important. What is that? She asked softly. Lorraine touched the cover. Just my household book. She keeps records, I said. Tessa opened it only after Lorraine nodded. She read the first page, then the next. Her face stayed professional, but her fingers slowed as she reached the entries where Darren's phrases appeared beside dollar amounts. Care coordination fee, route protection, garage repair reserve, extra utilities. I'd like to bring my branch manager in, Tessa said after a moment. Her name is Elaine Mercer. She handles situations where there may be unauthorized account activity or financial exploitation concerns. The word exploitation made Lorraine flinch. Tessa saw it. I'm not saying that to label your family, she said carefully. I'm saying it because there are protections we can start today if certain red flags are present. Lorraine swallowed. Protections. Yes, ma'am. Tessa stepped out. The office became quiet. Lorraine stared at the covered bridge print as if she were trying to cross it in her mind. I don't want them thinking Darren is some criminal, she whispered. I looked at the bank letter. I want them thinking the truth. A minute later, Tessa returned with Elaine Mercer. Elaine was a woman in her late 50s with short gray hair, navy glasses, and a calm, grounded presence that made the small office feel less fragile. She wore a dark blazer, but there was nothing stiff about her. Her face had the practiced gentleness of someone who had learned not to rush frightened people. Mr. and Mrs. Greer, she said, sitting down. Tessa gave me the basic concern. I'm going to ask a few direct questions, but I want you to understand something first. You are not in trouble. Lorraine let out a breath she had been holding. Elaine placed her hands flat on the table. If this line of credit was opened without your knowledge or consent, our first priority is to prevent further movement of funds while we review the application. We cannot make legal conclusions here at the branch, but we can protect the accounts and escalate the matter properly. That was exactly the kind of sentence I needed. Not dramatic. Useful. Elaine verified our identities first. Driver's licenses. Security questions. Old account information, only Lorraine and I would know. She asked us to confirm our real phone numbers, our real email address, and whether we had recently approved any secondary contact. No, I said when she read the number ending in Darren's 4 digits. Lorraine looked away. Elaine did not comment. She made a note. Then she turned her monitor slightly so only she could see it and began clicking through the account records. Tessa sat beside her, watching, learning, but also ready with a pen whenever Elaine asked for a form. The application was submitted online, Elaine said. The system shows document uploads, contractor estimate, property tax record, insurance declaration page, electronic signatures. The initial draw was dispersed to a business account associated with Fairlane Residential Improvements, LLC. I've never heard of them, I said. Elaine nodded. We will flag that. What about the pending draw? Lorraine asked, her voice small. Elaine's expression softened. That is the most immediate issue. It has not dispersed. I'm placing a temporary hold right now. Her fingers moved across the keyboard. Click, click, click. I watched the reflection of the monitor light in her glasses. It was not a courtroom. It was not a grand confrontation. No one raised a voice. No one pointed a shaking finger. But something shifted in that tiny office. A door that Darren had opened in secret began to close. Elaine printed a form and slid it toward us. This is a fraud affidavit. It states that you dispute the application and the disbursement as unauthorized. Take your time. Read before you sign. I did. Every line. Old habits again. Lorraine read slower. Halfway down the page, her eyes filled. Tessa quietly pushed the tissue box closer, without saying a word. Lorraine did not take one at first. Then she did. "I feel foolish," she said. Elaine leaned back slightly. "Mrs. Greer, people who exploit trust depend on good people feeling foolish. That shame does not belong to you." Lorraine pressed the tissue to her lips. Tessa spoke then, gently but firmly. "He may be your son," she said, "but your money and your home still belong to you." Lorraine closed her eyes. The sentence did not strike the room like thunder. It settled there like a hand placed over a shaking one. For weeks, Darren had spoken as though care gave him authority, as though fear gave him permission, as though being our son meant every boundary could be softened, renamed, or erased. But this young woman, who had known us only through a bank counter and her mother's old stories, said the one thing Lorraine had not been able to say to herself. "Your home still belongs to you." Lorraine signed the affidavit. Her hand trembled, but she signed. I signed after her. Elaine took the forms, scanned them, and placed printed copies in a folder for us. "Here is what we are doing today," she said. "The pending $24,000 draw is on hold. The line of credit is flagged for fraud review. Your accounts will have enhanced alerts. We are removing the secondary phone number pending investigation. We will reset your online access credentials, but I recommend you use a new email and do not share the password with anyone." "Anyone?" I repeated. Elaine looked at me over her glasses. "Anyone." Lorraine folded both hands around her purse strap. "What happens to the $7,200 that already went out?" "It will be part of the investigation," Elaine said. "We will trace the disbursement and review the application documents. I can't promise an outcome from this desk, but I can promise it will not be ignored." Tessa added, "We should also give you the number for the State Elder Financial Abuse Reporting Line, and I strongly recommend speaking with an elder law attorney." Lorraine stiffened at the word attorney. Elaine noticed. "Speaking with an attorney does not mean you are trying to punish someone. It means you are making sure you understand your rights before the situation escalates." The printer behind Elaine began to hum. She gathered several pages. Fraud affidavit copies, account alert confirmation, a checklist of next steps, and contact information for reporting suspected financial exploitation. Then she wrote one name on a sticky note in blue ink. "Maribel Knox. She's semi-retired," Elaine said. "But she still takes elder law cases when there are property or family financial concerns. She is practical, not flashy. She will tell you what is legal, not just what feels fair." I took the sticky note. Lorraine looked at it as if it weighed more than the paper itself. Before we stood to leave, Elaine spoke again. "One more thing. Please do not confront anyone alone tonight. Not about the hold, not about the phone number, not about the affidavit. If there is any threat, any pressure, any attempt to force access to your accounts, you call us during business hours and law enforcement if you feel unsafe." Lorraine's eyes moved to mine. There was fear there, but beneath it, something else had begun to form. Not certainty, not strength yet. Permission. We walked out of the office with a new folder tucked under my arm. The lobby looked exactly as it had when we entered. Coffee table, deposit slips, bulletin board, Peaches the missing orange cat. A man in a work jacket was filling out a withdrawal slip at the counter. An elderly woman was asking about CD rates. The world had not changed for them, but ours had. At the door, Tessa caught up with us. "Mr. Greer?" I turned. She held out the blue notebook with both hands. Lorraine must have left it on the office table. Lorraine reached for it quickly. "Oh, thank you." Tessa did not let go right away. Not because she was holding it from her, but because she wanted Lorraine to feel the weight of it. "You did the right thing keeping this," she said. Lorraine looked down at the cloth cover. "I thought I was just trying not to forget." "Sometimes that's how people save themselves," Tessa said. Lorraine held the notebook against her coat. We stepped outside into the cold sunlight. The frost had melted from the sidewalk, leaving the concrete dark and wet. I unlocked the car and opened Lorraine's door first. She sat down carefully, the blue notebook still in her lap, the folder of bank papers at her feet. I walked around to the driver's side but did not start the engine right away. Through the windshield, Main Street looked ordinary. A delivery truck stopped outside the pharmacy. A man carried dry cleaning over one shoulder. Somewhere, church bells rang 10 o'clock. Lorraine touched the folder with the toe of her shoe. "What do we tell Darren?" she asked. I looked straight ahead. Nothing yet. He'll know something happened when the money doesn't move. Yes, he'll be angry, I know. Her fingers rested on the blue notebook. "I'm afraid of my own son," she said. The words came out so quietly I almost hoped I had misheard them. But I had not. I reached over and covered her hand with mine. "You're not alone in it anymore." She turned toward the bank, where Tessa was visible through the glass, helping another customer at the counter. Elaine's office door stood open behind her. Lorraine looked back at me. For the first time in weeks, her voice did not sound ashamed. "Then let's go home," she said. I started the car. We drove back to the house with the bank folder between us. No longer just carrying suspicion, but carrying proof that someone outside our walls had seen the same thing we had. And that made all the difference. We drove home from Buckeye Valley Community Bank in a silence that was not empty. It was full of papers, full of signatures, full of words Lorraine and I had spent a lifetime hoping would never belong to our family. Fraud affidavit, unauthorized activity, financial exploitation, account hold. The folder Elaine Mercer had given us rested between us on the front seat. Lorraine kept one hand on the blue notebook in her lap, fingers curled around the cloth cover as though it might try to get away from her. Outside the windshield, Cedar Hollow looked the same as it always did. The pharmacy sign blinked. A delivery truck backed into the alley behind Miller's Market. A man in an orange vest swept salt from the sidewalk. The town had no idea that our house had shifted while we were gone. When I pulled into the driveway, Darren's sedan was not there. Lorraine let out a breath, but I could not tell whether it was relief or disappointment. "We have a little time," I said. She looked at the house. "It doesn't feel like enough." I carried the bank folder inside and placed it on the highest shelf of our bedroom closet, behind an old hatbox full of photographs. Lorraine put the blue notebook back under the tin of buttons in her sewing cabinet, but this time she did not hide it with the same shame. Her movement was careful, almost ceremonial, like putting a family Bible back in its place after reading a hard passage. Then we did ordinary things, because the body sometimes needs ordinary motions when the mind has gone somewhere frightening. Lorraine took chicken soup from the refrigerator and set it on the stove. I went outside to tighten the loose board on the back step I had been meaning to fix. The sky had cleared, and the cold had sharpened. Every sound seemed brighter than usual: the scrape of my screwdriver, the cawing of a crow in the maple tree, the distant hum of traffic from County Road 9. I kept thinking about Elaine's final warning. "Please do not confront anyone alone tonight." It was strange to be 72 years old and suddenly need advice on how to speak to your own son. Around 2:30, Darren came home. I heard his car before I saw it. The engine had a rough little rattle when he turned into the drive, a sound I had mentioned once, and he had brushed off. He parked crooked, half on the gravel and half on the thin strip of grass beside it. The front door opened hard enough to make the little glass pane tremble. Lorraine was at the stove. I was sitting at the kitchen table, not reading the newspaper. The folder was not in sight. The blue notebook was not in sight. The routine paper still hung on the refrigerator, but the room felt different around it now, as if its authority had expired and it did not know it yet. Darren walked in with his phone in one hand and a tight smile already forming. "Hey," he said. "You two go somewhere this morning?" Lorraine stirred the soup. "Town," I said. His eyes moved from me to her. "Town where?" "Bank." I said it plainly. Not as a challenge, not as a confession, just the truth. For half a second, something raw crossed his face. It was too quick to call fear, but not too quick for a father to recognize. Then he laughed. "The bank? What for?" "To ask about a letter." Lorraine's spoon slowed against the pot. Darren leaned against the counter. "A letter?" "Yes." "What kind of letter?" I folded my hands on the table. "A home improvement line." He did not answer right away. He looked down at his phone, as if a message had arrived, though the screen was dark. "Oh," he said finally. "That." Lorraine turned then. "You know about it?" Darren lifted both hands. "Mom, don't look at me like that. It's not what you think. That sentence never improves a room." I waited. He put the phone on the counter and sighed heavily, already setting himself inside the role he preferred. Misunderstood, overburdened, wounded by our lack of trust. "I was trying to get ahead of things," he said. "The roof is old, the windows leak, the garage has issues. You two don't see how fast costs are going up. The roof is sound," I said. "Dad, with respect, you are not a contractor. And Fairlane Residential Improvements is?" His eyes sharpened. I had not raised my voice. That bothered him more. "What did the bank tell you?" "They told us the pending draw is on hold." The color in his face changed. Just slightly. Enough. Lorraine saw it too. I knew because she stopped stirring entirely. Darren straightened. "They had no right to do that." "They had every right," I said. "It is our account." "It's your house," he snapped, then caught himself. "I mean, yes, technically, but I'm the one trying to make sure you don't get buried under emergency repairs. By opening credit in our names? I didn't open anything that wasn't for your benefit." Lorraine's voice came soft from the stove. "Did you sign for us?" Darren turned toward her too quickly. "Mom, electronic authorization is complicated. You don't understand how these systems work." She flinched at the old familiar shape of the sentence. "You don't understand." I saw it land on her, but I also saw it fail to sink as deeply as it used to. "The bank understands," she said. Darren blinked. It was not much. 4 words from a woman standing beside a soup pot. But it shifted the room. He reached for his phone. "Who did you talk to?" I said nothing. "Was it that girl behind the counter? The one with the cardigan?" Lorraine looked up. "Her name is Tessa." Darren gave a humorless little laugh. "Of course. A 20-something bank teller gives you one serious face, and suddenly I'm the bad guy." "She brought in the branch manager," I said. He stopped. There it was again. Not fear exactly. Calculation. "What branch manager?" "Hélène Mercier." He looked away, jaw tightening. Then his phone buzzed. He grabbed it too fast. The screen lit his face from below. He read whatever had arrived, and the mask slipped more fully this time. His mouth parted. His thumb moved quickly across the screen. He turned away from us and walked into the hallway, but not far enough. "Come on," he muttered. A moment later, he came back into the kitchen with forced calm. "I need to make a call." "Go ahead," I said. "I said I need privacy." "You have a room." His eyes went flat. Lorraine moved the soup off the burner. Darren walked down the hall and closed his door. Not hard, controlled. The way a man closes a door when he wants to appear calm to people he no longer trusts. We heard his voice through the wall anyway. Not every word. Just pieces. "No, it's a temporary hold." "Pause." I said temporary. "Pause." They must have gotten confused. "Pause. Don't submit anything else yet." Lorraine sat down across from me. Her hands were folded tightly. I wanted to reach for her, but I did not. Sometimes comfort given too quickly can break what a person is trying hard to hold together. Darren's voice dropped lower. "I'll fix it." Then the sound stopped. When he came back, his face had changed again. The anger was hidden now behind concern. That was more dangerous. He pulled out the chair beside Lorraine and sat down slowly, as if approaching a frightened animal. "Mom," he said, "I need you to listen to me and not let Dad's stubbornness turn this into something ugly." I looked at him. "Careful. I'm trying to prevent a family disaster," he said, eyes still on Lorraine. "That bank doesn't care about you. They care about liability. They see 2 elderly people confused about paperwork, and they panic." Lorraine's fingers moved toward the edge of the table. Darren noticed. "You know I've been here every day," he continued. "I've cooked. I've fixed things. I've organized bills. I've tried to keep you safe. And now, some stranger at a bank makes you feel scared of your own son?" Lorraine looked down. He leaned closer. "Mom, if I wanted to hurt you, would I be here?" The question was cruel because it sounded tender. Lorraine's eyes filled, but she did not answer. I had spent the whole drive home wondering when Darren would stop pretending the hold was a misunderstanding and start turning the blade toward her heart. There it was. I said, "We are not discussing this without the bank involved." Darren turned on me. "You always do this." "Do what?" "You make everything about control. You've never trusted me. Not when I was 20, not when I was 30. Not now. You gave me reasons." He laughed once, sharp. "There it is," Lorraine whispered. "Please don't." But Darren had found a familiar road and wanted to drive it fast. "You know what this is really about," he said. "You hate needing me. You hate that you're getting older and someone has to step in." "No," I said. "I hate being lied to." He stood so quickly the chair scraped back. "Lied to? I have been carrying this house for weeks." Lorraine looked at him then, and something in her face changed. Not strength exactly. Recognition. She stood from the table and walked to the stove. For a moment, I thought she was going to turn the soup back on, hide inside the old work of feeding everyone. Instead, she reached to the little drawer beside the stove. The grocery drawer. The drawer with the white envelopes. She opened it. There were only 2 envelopes left inside. One marked groceries, one marked church. She touched the grocery envelope but did not take it out. Darren watched her. So did I. "I used to keep 4 envelopes in here," she said. Her voice was quiet enough that the refrigerator seemed loud behind it. "Groceries. Church. Gas. Haircut money." Darren frowned. "Mom." Then I started taking from groceries for care fees, then gas for router protection, then haircut money for garage reserve. She closed the drawer. I told myself every time that it was small, that you needed help, that mother's help. Darren's face tightened. "That's exactly what this is. Family helping family." Lorraine turned around. "No," she said. "It stopped feeling like help when I got scared to say no." Darren stared at her. The room did not explode. It narrowed. That was the moment I knew the bank had done more than hold a transaction. It had given Lorraine a line to stand behind. Darren saw it too, and it frightened him. He reached for a different weapon. "Fine," he said, voice cooling. "If that's how you feel, maybe Nora should hear about this." Lorraine stiffened. Darren pulled his phone from his pocket. "Maybe she needs to know what's happening here. Maybe she needs to know Dad is dragging you to banks, signing fraud papers you don't understand, letting some random teller scare you into accusing your own son. Nora, our daughter in Oregon, a hospice nurse with tired eyes and a voice that could calm a room. She called every Sunday evening if work allowed. Lorraine had not told her much about Darren beyond, "He's staying with us for a while." Pride had kept the truth folded away like a stained tablecloth. Darren knew that. He knew Lorraine feared looking like a bad mother in front of her daughter. "Call her," I said. Darren's thumb froze over the screen. Lorraine turned to me. I kept my eyes on him. "Call Nora," he recovered with a scoff. "I'm not doing this circus right now. You brought her up? She's working. She doesn't need Dad's drama. Then don't use her name as a threat." Darren's face flushed. For the first time since he walked into the kitchen, he had run into a door that did not open when he pushed. His phone buzzed again. He looked down. This time, he did not hide the panic well. His thumb moved, then stopped. He put the phone face down on the counter. "Who is it?" I asked. "None of your business. If it involves our accounts, it is." It doesn't, but he was lying badly now. Lorraine saw it. That was the important thing. He had always been able to turn her heart toward his pain before she could examine his behavior. Now the order had changed. She was watching what he did before listening to what he said. Darren seemed to feel the difference in the room and hated it. He walked to the hook near the back door where my keys usually hung. "I'm taking the truck," he said. "No." He reached anyway. The hook was empty. Not because of him this time. Because before we left for the bank, I had put the main truck key in my coat pocket and the spare in the small lockbox beneath our bed. Old habits. Yes. But old habits had kept many men alive around bad wiring and wet roads. Darren stared at the empty hook. "Where are the keys?" "With me." "I need to run an errand." "You have your car. It's almost out of gas." "Then put gas in it." His hand closed slowly into a fist. Lorraine stepped away from the stove. "Darren." He turned toward her. What? Don't speak to your father like that. He almost laughed. Almost. But he saw her face and stopped. The soup sat cooling on the stove. The paper routine still hung from the refrigerator. The pill organizer sat beside the salt and pepper. His black mug waited in the sink. Every object in that room still carried some mark of the weeks he had been shaping our lives around his needs. But something invisible had moved. The house was no longer leaning toward him. Darren took a breath, then another. He looked as if he wanted to shout but had decided shouting would prove too much. So, he did what he had done from the beginning. He changed his face. "I'm sorry," he said. The words came too smooth. Lorraine did not move. "I'm sorry," he repeated, softer now. "I'm under pressure. I lost my job. I'm trying to help. And everything I do comes out wrong." He looked at her as if I were not in the room. "Mom, please, don't let strangers turn us against each other." There was a time that would have undone her. I saw the old instinct rise in her shoulders. The mother's reach toward the wounded child, the desperate need to soothe before the wound became anger. But then her hand went to the pocket of her cardigan. The blue notebook was not there. It was hidden under the tin of buttons. Still, I could tell she felt it. "I need time," she said. Darren stared. "Time for what?" "To think." "You need time to think about your own son?" She swallowed. "Yes." The word was not loud, but it was new. Darren looked from her to me, searching for the old arrangement. Father as obstacle, mother as doorway. But the doorway had closed. Not locked yet. Closed. He stepped back from the counter. "Fine," he said. Then he turned and walked down the hall. His bedroom door shut harder this time. Not a slam. Not quite. But hard enough that the routine paper trembled slightly on the refrigerator. Lorraine remained standing until the house settled. Then she reached for the back of a chair and lowered herself into it. I sat across from her. "You did well," I said. She shook her head. "I feel sick." "That doesn't mean you did wrong." She looked at the hallway. He sounded so hurt. He knows how to sound hurt. The sentence was harsh, but she did not argue. For a long while we sat with the cooling soup between us. Then Lorraine stood and went to the stove. She turned the burner back on, stirred once, and took down 2 bowls. Only 2. She filled them slowly. When Darren's door opened a few minutes later, he stood in the hallway and looked toward the table. Lorraine did not rush to serve him. She did not apologize. She did not explain. "Soup is on the stove," she said. He waited. So did she. Finally, Darren walked to the stove and filled his own bowl. It was a small thing. A spoon, a pot, a grown man serving himself. But in our house that night, it felt like the first loose board being nailed back into place. The next morning, Lorraine did not make 3 cups of coffee. She made 2. I noticed before Darren did. For nearly all our married life, coffee had been Lorraine's quiet language of care. She made it for neighbors who came by after storms, for repairmen who worked too long in the cold, for church ladies who sat at our kitchen table with casserole dishes and sad news. Since Darren had moved in, she had filled his black dealership mug every morning before he came out of the back room. That morning, the black mug stayed in the cabinet. Lorraine poured coffee into our 2 plain white cups and carried them to the table. Her hands were steady enough, though I knew the steadiness cost her something. She sat down across from me, wrapped both palms around her cup, and looked toward the hallway. Darren's door was closed. No sound came from behind it. "He didn't sleep much," she said. "Neither did we." She lowered her eyes. "I kept hearing him moving around. So did I. I wanted to knock. I knew that. I had heard her get out of bed twice in the night. Both times she stood near our bedroom door, listening toward the hallway. Both times she came back without opening it. "But you didn't," I said. She shook her head. The bank folder sat on the table between us now. Not hidden. Not displayed. Just present. After the previous night, hiding it felt like letting fear choose the furniture again. Lorraine reached for the sticky note Elaine Mercer had given us. The name written in blue ink had begun to curl at one corner. Maribel Knox. "I don't know if I can do this," Lorraine said. "Call her? Call a lawyer about my own son." I looked at the hallway too. We're not calling about our son. We're calling about our house, our accounts, and our rights. That sounds cleaner than it feels. It is not clean, I said. It is necessary. She let that sit for a while. Then she picked up the phone. Her voice trembled when she asked for Maribel Knox's office, but she did not hang up. She did not hand the phone to me. She wrote down the appointment time herself in the little calendar beside the phone, the one with pictures of covered bridges for each month. 10:30. Maribel's office was on the second floor of an old brick building near the county courthouse, above a tax preparer and a shop that sold used books. There was no shiny sign outside, no marble lobby, no receptionist in a headset. Just a narrow staircase that smelled faintly of dust and lemon cleaner. Lorraine climbed slowly, holding the railing. I stayed one step behind her. Not because she needed help, but because I wanted her to know I was there if she did. At the top, a frosted glass door read, Maribel Knox, Elder Law and Property Matters, by appointment. Inside, the office was small and warm. 2 bookshelves leaned under the weight of old legal volumes and binders labeled in thick black marker. A brass lamp glowed on a side table. Near the window sat a rubber plant with glossy leaves and one brown edge. Nothing in the room tried to impress us. That I liked immediately. Maribel Knox stood when we entered. She was in her early 60s, maybe a little older, with silver hair cut close to her jaw and eyes that seemed to listen before she spoke. She wore a dark green sweater instead of a suit jacket, and there was a pair of reading glasses hanging from a cord around her neck. Her handshake was dry, firm, and unhurried. Mr. and Mrs. Greer, she said. Elaine Mercer called to let me know you might be coming. She did not share details, only that there may be an urgent property and financial concern. I appreciate that, I said. She knows confidentiality, Maribel replied. So do I. Lorraine sat in the chair nearest the window, placing her purse carefully on her lap. I took the other chair and set the bank folder on Maribel's desk. For a few minutes, Maribel said very little. She read. That was her way. Not dramatic, not reactive. She read the fraud affidavit, the bank letter, the notice about the pending draw, the account alert confirmation, the photograph of Darren's pale blue fee paper, and several pages Lorraine had copied from the blue notebook. Every now and then she made a small mark on a yellow legal pad. Lorraine watched her face closely, as if trying to learn whether we were cruel people. Maribel finally looked up. Your son has been living in the home how long? A little over 6 weeks, I said. Does he pay rent? No. Lorraine's mouth tightened. Maribel saw it and added, I mean formal rent, lease, written agreement, anything like that. No, Lorraine said. He said he was staying temporarily. Does he receive mail there? Yes, I said. Some. Does he have a key? He did, I said. Maribel's pen paused. Did? He has a spare key we gave him. I still have my main truck key. We have not changed the house locks. Good, she said. The word surprised me. Good? Good that you have not changed the locks yet. Good that you have not put his belongings outside. Good that you have not tried to force him out yourselves. Lorraine looked stricken. We weren't going to throw him out on the lawn. I know, Maribel said gently. But people under stress sometimes act out of fear and then create legal problems for themselves. Your son may not have a lease, but he has been living there. Depending on the circumstances, he may be treated as having some occupancy rights. We need to do this correctly. A strange relief passed through me. Not because the situation was easier, because someone had finally spoken of rules that did not belong to Darren. For weeks, he had made rules on refrigerator paper, rules about laundry, pills, thermostats, doors, money, and who understood what. Now, in a quiet office above a used bookstore, a woman in a green sweater was telling us there were rules above his rules. Can we make him leave? Lorraine asked. Her voice broke slightly on make. Maribel Folherhens. You can require him to leave your home through proper written notice. If he refuses, there are legal steps after that. I am going to recommend a written notice to vacate. Calm language. No accusations in the notice beyond what is necessary. Separately, we document the financial issues for the bank and any appropriate reporting. Lorraine looked down at her purse. I don't want him arrested. Maribel's face softened, but her voice did not lose its structure. Mrs. Greer, wanting safety does not mean you are asking for revenge. Those are different things. Lorraine pressed her lips together. Maribel leaned forward slightly. Let me say something plainly. A boundary is not a punishment. It is a fence around what remains of your peace. Lorraine's eyes filled at that. I reached over and took her hand. Maribel gave us a moment. She did not rush to fill the room with instructions. That restraint told me she had sat with many families at this exact kind of table, watching love and fear fight over the same chair. When Lorraine could speak again, she whispered, He'll say we betrayed him. He may, Maribel said. He'll say we chose the bank over our own blood. He may say that too. What do I say back? Maribel's answer came quiet. You say, I am protecting my home. You do not have to argue with every version of the story he creates. Lorraine closed her eyes. I saw the sentence enter her, not as comfort, but as a tool. Maribel turned to me. Has there been any physical threat? No. Any pushing, blocking doors, taking phones, preventing you from leaving? No. Any pressure to give passwords or sign documents? Yes, I said. Pressure, not force. She made another note. And the bank has removed the secondary phone number? Yes. Good. Do not share new credentials. Do not leave bank documents where he can photograph them. Keep your notebook somewhere safe. If you communicate with him about money or the home, do it in writing where possible. If he becomes aggressive, leave the room. Call for help if you feel unsafe. Lorraine looked frightened again. Maribel noticed. I am not saying this to scare you. I am saying it so fear does not have to make decisions for you. That was the moment the appointment changed for me. Until then, I had thought we were there to learn how to deal with Darren. But really, Maribel was teaching us how not to let fear run the house anymore. She drafted the notice while we sat there. The room filled with the soft sounds of her keyboard, the hum of the old radiator, and Lorraine's uneven breathing. The words on the screen were plain and firm. Darren Greer was being given written notice to vacate the residence. He was to remove his personal property by a specific date. He was not authorized to access or manage financial accounts, loan documents, property records, or household funds. No insults, no speeches, no pleading. Just lines, clear lines. When Maribel printed the notice, Lorraine stared at it for a long time. That piece of paper feels heavier than the bank letter, she said. It is, Maribel replied. The bank letter told you what happened. This tells him what happens now. We left Maribel's office with a folder of our own. Copies of the notice, instructions for documenting contact, numbers for Adult Protective Services and the County Sheriff's Civil Office, and a recommendation that if Darren resisted leaving, we arrange a civil stand-by rather than handle it alone. On the way home, Lorraine held the folder in her lap. She did not cry. I almost wished she would. Tears would have seemed easier than that stillness. But Lorraine had gone somewhere deep inside herself, somewhere I could not follow. When we pulled into the driveway, Darren's car was there. He was waiting in the kitchen, not sitting, standing. His phone lay face down on the table. His black mug sat beside it, untouched. He had not made coffee. He looked from my face to Lorraine's purse, then to the folder in her hands. Where were you? He asked. Lorraine took off her coat slowly and hung it on the hook by the door. With an attorney, she said. Darren's expression emptied, then filled again with disbelief. An attorney? Yes. He looked at me and laughed, but there was no humor in it. You've got to be kidding me. No one is kidding, I said. He turned back to Lorraine. Mom, tell me you didn't actually let him drag you to a lawyer. Lorraine stood very still. I knew what that cost her. Darren's voice had gone soft at the edges, wounded enough to reach for her, sharp enough to cut if she came close. She opened the folder. Her fingers trembled only once. Then she placed the notice on the table. Darren did not pick it up at first. What is that? Lorraine answered before I could. It is written notice. Notice for what? For you to leave the house. The kitchen clock ticked. Once. Twice. Darren stared at her as if she had spoken in a language he did not know. Then his face changed. All the softness vanished. "You're evicting your own son?" "It is not an eviction yet," I said. "It is notice to vacate." He snapped his head toward me. "Shut up." Lorraine flinched. My hands tightened at my sides, but I did not move toward him. Maribel's advice returned with remarkable clarity. "Do not make fear decide. Do not make anger decide either." Lorraine spoke again. "Don't talk to your father that way." Darren's breathing grew louder. He picked up the paper then, scanning it fast. Too fast to read, but fast enough to understand the shape. His name. Dates. Property. Remove personal belongings. No authority over accounts. "This is insane," he said. "No," Lorraine replied. "It is clear." He stared at her. That answer hit him harder than anger would have. For years, Darren had counted on his mother's love being soft enough to reshape. If he arrived ashamed, she forgave. If he sounded hurt, she soothed. If he needed money, she found a drawer, an envelope, a reason. Now she stood in front of him with a lawyer's paper on the table and would not turn it into an apology. He looked down at the notice again, then at the house around him, at the cabinets, at the hallway, at the living room where his shoes sat near the door and his jacket hung where Lorraine's gardening sweater used to hang. Something ugly moved behind his eyes. "You know what?" he said quietly. "This is exactly what I should have expected." Lorraine said nothing. Darren tapped the notice with 2 fingers. Everything in this house was going to be mine someday anyway. The words landed with a force I felt in my teeth. Lorraine's face went still. Darren kept going, the way a man does when the thing he has hidden finally breaks its leash. "You act like I'm some stranger off the street. I'm your son. I'm the one who came back. I'm the one dealing with the old bills and the old house and the 2 of you pretending you're fine." He looked at me. "You were never going to help me. You were just going to sit on all this until you died and leave me whatever scraps were left after Nora and everyone else got their piece." Lorraine whispered, "Darren," but he was past hearing her pain. "I just needed it sooner," he said. No one moved. No one breathed for a second. There it was. Not apology. Not confusion. Not a son overwhelmed by mistakes. Entitlement. Plain and bare on our kitchen table. Everything in this house was going to be mine someday. I just needed it sooner. Lorraine lowered herself into a chair. Not because she was weak. Because sometimes truth takes the strength out of a body when it finally stops pretending to be something else. Darren seemed to realize what he had said only after the silence answered him. His face shifted again. "Mom," he began. She raised one hand. He stopped. It was not a dramatic gesture. No pointing, no shouting. Just her palm lifted between them, small and pale and firm. "Enough," she said. Darren looked stunned. Lorraine reached for the notice, turned it so the words faced him clearly, and slid it back across the table. "You need to read it," she said. "All of it." "Mom, all of it." He looked at me, but I gave him nothing. For the first time since he had come home, Darren was standing in our kitchen with no script that worked. He picked up the notice. This time, he read. I watched his eyes move line by line. He saw the date, the conditions, the instruction not to access or interfere with our accounts, the reference to legal counsel, the contact information for Maribel Knox. When he finished, the paper shook slightly in his hand. "You'll regret this," he said. Maybe he meant it as a threat. Maybe he meant it as prophecy. Lorraine looked up at him, and her voice came tired but steady. "I already regret waiting this long." Darren folded the notice badly, not along its lines, and shoved it against his chest as if it were something burning him. Then he turned and walked down the hall. His door closed. Hard. This time, it did slam. The sound traveled through the house and seemed to wake every quiet object in it. The cups in the cabinet. The spoons in the drawer. The old framed picture of our children on the wall, taken long before any of us knew how complicated love could become. Lorraine sat at the table, looking at nothing. I went to her, but before I could touch her shoulder, she spoke. "He thought we were already gone," she said. I understood. Darren had not been waiting for us to die in a violent way. Not consciously, Maybe not even cruelly in the way villains in stories are cruel. He had simply begun living as if our lives, our choices, our house, our money, and our peace were already part of his future inventory. That might have been worse. Lorraine reached for the folder and placed Maribel's business card on top of it. "Call her," she said. "Now?" "Yes. Tell her he received it." "I did." Maribel answered on the third ring. I told her what happened, including Darren's exact words. She was quiet for a moment after I repeated them. "Write that down," she said. "Date, time, exact wording. Both of you sign the note if you can." So we did. At the kitchen table, while Darren stayed behind his closed door, Lorraine opened the blue notebook and turned to a fresh page. Her hand shook at first, then steadied. She wrote the date, the time, then the sentence. Everything in this house was going to be mine someday anyway. I just needed it sooner. When she finished, she set the pen down and looked at the words. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she did not wipe it away. "That is the first honest thing he has said since he came home," she whispered. I sat beside her. Down the hallway, Darren moved around his room, opening drawers, closing them, muttering under his breath. The notice had been served. The line had been drawn. And whether our son accepted it or not, the house no longer belonged to his version of the story. The days after Darren received the notice did not move like ordinary days. They stretched. Every hour seemed to have corners. Darren stayed mostly in the back room. We heard drawers opening, boxes dragging, his phone vibrating against the desk, the low murmur of calls he did not want us to hear. He did not tape new papers to the refrigerator. He did not comment on the thermostat. He did not ask about dinner or laundry or whether I had taken my pills. That silence should have been peaceful. It was not. It had weight. Lorraine moved through the house carefully, no longer shrinking, but not yet free. She kept Maribel Knox's card beside the kitchen phone. The bank folder stayed in our bedroom closet. The blue notebook remained under the tin of buttons, except when Lorraine brought it out each evening to add a line or two. No arguments today. Darren stayed in room until noon. He took 2 boxes to car. He muttered, "This is ridiculous," while passing kitchen. Small things. Exact things. The kind of details Maribel had told us to keep. On the third evening, Darren came into the kitchen while Lorraine was rinsing a plate. "I need more time," he said. Lorraine did not turn around immediately. She set the plate into the drying rack, wiped her hands on a towel, and then faced him. "How much time?" "I don't know, a couple weeks, maybe a month." "No," she said. Just that. No apology wrapped around it. Darren looked at me, then back at her. "You're really going to put me out?" "You were given a date?" I said. His mouth tightened. "I wasn't talking to you." Lorraine's hand gripped the towel once, then relaxed. "The date stays," she said. He stared at her like he was trying to locate the mother he knew how to move. She was still there. That was the thing he could not understand. She was still the woman who had packed his school lunches, sat up during his fevers, mailed him grocery gift cards when he said work was slow. But she was no longer willing to confuse love with surrender. Darren saw that and hated it. He left the kitchen without another word. That night, Lorraine called Maribel and told her Darren had asked for more time. Maribel listened, then advised us to keep the original date and arrange a civil standby, not because Darren had been violent, but because tension had risen and property needed to be removed without chaos. So the final morning was planned. That was what made it feel strange. A family breaking point had an appointment time. Thursday, 9 o'clock. I woke before dawn and lay beside Lorraine without moving. The room was still dark, but the window had begun to gray around the edges. I could hear Darren in the hallway. Footsteps. A box. Sliding. Tape ripping. Once, something fell. And he cursed under his breath. Lorraine was awake too. I knew by her breathing. "You all right?" I asked. "No," she said. I reached for her hand under the blanket. She let me hold it. After a moment, she added, "But I know what today is." "What is it?" She looked toward the ceiling. "The day the house stops, waiting for him to decide what happens inside it." We got up at 6. Lorraine dressed in a soft blue cardigan and pinned her hair back with the silver clip she wore to church. I put on my brown work jacket. the one with a small tear near the cuff. Neither of us dressed as if we were going to battle. We dressed as if we had work to do. And we did. At 8:30, Maribel arrived. She parked at the curb and walked up the path, carrying a slim leather folder. In daylight, she looked smaller than she had in her office, but no less steady. She did not come in with a speech. She simply touched Lorraine's arm and said, "We will keep this calm." A few minutes later, a county vehicle pulled up behind her. Deputy Carl Renner stepped out slowly, not like a man expecting trouble, but like a man determined not to create any. He was near 60, broad through the shoulders, with a weathered face and a gray mustache trimmed close. His uniform was neat but not polished into intimidation. He removed his hat when Lorraine opened the door. "Mrs. Greer," he said. "Mr. Greer, I'm just here for a civil standby. I won't interfere, unless I need to." His voice carried the gravel of someone who had spent years talking people down from bad afternoons. Lorraine nodded. "Thank you." Behind him, a white van pulled along the curb. The lettering on the side read Voss, Lock, and Key. The man who climbed out was thin, red-haired, and younger than I expected, maybe late 30s, with a tool belt hanging low around his hips and a pencil tucked behind one ear. Eddie Voss gave me a short nod. "I'll wait until you give the word," he said. No one made it into a spectacle. No flashing lights. No neighbors gathering in robes. No shouted accusations from the lawn. Just a lawyer, a deputy, a locksmith, and two old people standing in the house they had spent their lives earning. That quiet almost broke me, because I realized how little we were asking for. Not punishment, not revenge, not even an apology. Only the right to close our own door and know who had a key to it. Darren came out of the back room at 9:15. He had 2 suitcases, 3 cardboard boxes, and a black trash bag full of clothes slung over one shoulder. His eyes were red, though whether from anger or lack of sleep, I could not tell. His hair, usually combed back with too much care, had fallen loose over his forehead. He stopped when he saw Deputy Renner near the front door. "You called a cop?" Maribel answered before either of us could. "Deputy Renner is here for a civil standby, Mr. Greer. To make sure the move-out is peaceful." Darren laughed once. "Peaceful? That's rich." The deputy did not react. Lorraine stood beside the kitchen table, both hands resting lightly on the back of a chair. She did not hide behind me. I noticed that. So did Darren. He looked at her. "You're really doing this?" She met his eyes. Yes. The answer seemed to take more from him than an argument would have. He shifted the trash bag higher on his shoulder. "After everything I tried to do for you," Lorraine's fingers tightened slightly on the chair. I waited for the old wound to open in her face. It did, but it did not take over. "You tried to take from us and call it care," she said. Darren's expression hardened. "You've been rehearsing that with the lawyer?" "No," Lorraine said. "I learned it living with you." He looked away first. That was the moment I felt the chapter of our old life close. Not the whole story, not the grief, but the part where Darren's voice decided what our pain meant. Maribel checked the list of belongings with him. Darren complained about nearly every item. Said some boxes were missing. Said some tools in the garage were his. Said the router belonged to him because he bought it. Maribel kept her tone level and asked for receipts. When he could not produce them, she noted the dispute and moved on. Deputy Renner stood near the doorway, arms relaxed, saying very little. That helped. Some people bring calm by filling a room with authority. He brought it by not feeding the fire. The last box Darren carried from his room was not heavy. I knew because he lifted it with one hand. On top of it sat his black dealership mug, wrapped badly in a dish towel. Lorraine saw it. For weeks that mug had sat at the front of our cabinet like a flag. I had grown to dislike the sight of it, more than any sensible man should dislike a cup. Now, seeing it leave in a cardboard box, I felt foolishly relieved. Darren followed my eyes and smirked. "Don't worry, Dad. I won't leave any of myself behind." Lorraine spoke before I could. "That is not true," she said quietly. Darren stopped. Her voice did not shake. "You left plenty. We will have to clean it up." For once, he had no answer. He carried the box outside. The morning had turned damp and gray. His car sat open in the driveway, trunk packed badly, one suitcase wedged at an angle. He shoved the final box inside and slammed the trunk. Then he came back to the porch, not all the way in. His eyes moved over the doorway, the porch light, the little crack in the step I had fixed, the flower bed that still showed patches of broken stems from the day he first dragged bins across it. Finally, he looked at Lorraine. "You're choosing them over me." There it was, the last card, the one he had been saving because it had always worked before. Lorraine stepped onto the porch. The air seemed to hold still. I moved closer, but not in front of her. "No," she said. "I am choosing not to be afraid in my own home anymore." Darren's face changed. Not into remorse, not quite, but into recognition that the sentence had found a place even his guilt could not reach. He looked at me. I said, "What happens with the bank now is between you, the bank, and whoever they send it to. You think you won?" He said, "No." I answered, "I think we waited too long to protect what was ours." He opened his mouth, then closed it. Deputy Renner stepped just a little closer to the porch rail. Not threatening, present. Darren saw him, looked back at his mother one last time, and turned away. His car door shut. The engine rattled twice before it caught. Lorraine stood beside me as he backed out of the driveway. He did not wave. He did not look back. His car rolled down the street past June Callister's house, past the bare maple branches, past the place where our road curved toward town. Then he was gone. Lorraine did not cry right away. She stood very still. I thought of the first day he arrived, one suitcase in the trunk, shame in his voice, his arms around his mother. I thought of all the ways love can blind a person, and all the ways it can make a person brave when blindness finally fails. Eddie Voss waited until Maribel nodded. Then he went to work. The sound of the first lock coming apart was small and metallic. A click. A scrape. A screw dropped into Eddie's palm. He moved efficiently, replacing the front lock, then the back, then the garage entry, then the mailbox. He did not make conversation beyond what was needed. I appreciated that. When he handed me the new keys, they were still cool from the cut. 4 bright pieces of metal on a plain ring. I held them in my palm and felt something loosen in my chest. Keys are simple things until someone misuses them. Then they become promises. Maribel reviewed the next steps before leaving. If Darren came back without permission, we were not to open the door. If he called about money, we were to keep records. If the bank contacted us, we were to forward copies to her. She reminded us that the investigation into the line of credit would take time. "Do not measure justice only by how fast it moves," she said. Sometimes the first justice is simply stopping the harm. After everyone left, the house sounded unfamiliar, not empty. Oh. Lorraine walked through each room slowly. She did not touch much. In the back room, Darren had left behind dust outlines on the desk, a torn receipt under the bed, and the faint smell of cologne. Lorraine stood in the doorway but did not go in. "I want my sewing room back," she said. "Then we'll make it that." The phone rang at 3:14. I remember because I looked at the clock and felt my stomach tighten. It was Tessa from Buckeye Valley Community Bank. Her voice was professional, but warm. She confirmed that the pending $24,000 draw had been fully blocked. The home improvement line remained under fraud review, and no further disbursement could occur without direct verified authorization from both Lorraine and me. The business account that received the first draw had been flagged for investigation. "I know there is still a process ahead," she said. "But your accounts are protected." I thanked her. She paused, then added, "Mrs. Greer is there." Lorraine was standing near the sink. I handed her the phone. She listened quietly, one hand pressed against the counter. Then she said, "Thank you, Tessa." I could not hear Tessa's answer, but I saw Lorraine's eyes soften. After she hung up, Lorraine stood there a moment with the receiver still in her hand. "What did she say?" I asked. Lorraine smiled faintly through the exhaustion. "She said we took our house back. Late that afternoon, the clouds broke just enough for a thin wash of sunlight to reach the front porch." Lorraine went to the coat closet and took out her gardening gloves. I looked at her. "Now?" "Now." The flower bed along the walkway looked worse than I remembered. Winter had browned the stems. Darren's boxes had crushed part of the border. A strip near the porch had gone bare where the soil had been kicked loose. Lorraine knelt carefully, and I lowered myself beside her with less grace than I would have liked. We pulled the dead stems first, then the weeds. Then I opened a small bag of soil I had bought weeks earlier and never used. Lorraine worked slowly, pressing the new soil around the roots of a few surviving plants. Her hands were steady. Dirt gathered beneath her fingernails. A strand of hair slipped loose across her cheek, and for the first time in many days, she did not look like a woman listening for trouble behind her. June Callister crossed the street just before sunset. She carried a loaf of pumpkin bread wrapped in foil. "I saw the locksmith," she said gently, stopping at the edge of the walk. "Figured I shouldn't ask too many questions." Lorraine looked up from the flower bed. "Thank you for that." June nodded toward the porch. "But I also figured bread doesn't count as a question." Lorraine laughed. It was small, rusty, but real. June did not stay long. She left the bread on the porch rail and squeezed Lorraine's shoulder once before walking back across the street. Evening settled slowly. The new keys lay on the kitchen table beside the pumpkin bread. The blue notebook was closed. The bank folder was back in the closet. Darren's black mug was gone from the cabinet, and our two plain white cups sat in front where they belonged. I stepped onto the porch as the porch light came on. Lorraine joined me a moment later. The flower bed looked rough, unfinished, and hopeful. Little green starts pressed into dark soil. Nothing blooming yet. Nothing guaranteed. She slipped her hand through my arm. "Spring will come back through here," she said. I looked at the new key in my palm, then at the warm light spilling from our kitchen window. "Yes," I said. "And this time, we'll know who has the key." Lorraine leaned her head against my shoulder. We did not celebrate. That would have felt wrong. A son had left our house carrying more than boxes. He had carried away an old version of our family, one we would grieve for a long time. But grief and peace can stand on the same porch. That evening they did. Behind us, the house held steady. Before us, the dark soil waited. And for the first time in months, when I locked the front door, the sound did not feel like fear. It felt like home. Sometimes the hardest door to close is the one we kept open out of love. Milton and Lorraine did not win by hurting their son. They won by telling the truth, setting a boundary, and protecting the peace they had spent a lifetime building. Their story reminds us that forgiveness does not mean handing someone the keys to harm us again. In everyday life, many people suffer quietly because they do not want to disappoint family. But love should never require fear. And sometimes, by God's grace, help comes through a small record, an honest witness, a steady hand, and the courage to say, "This is still my home." If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to protect your peace from someone you loved? And if you want more stories of quiet strength, healing, and justice, please subscribe. May your home be safe, your heart be steady, and your peace be protected.